Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of ReAwakening Minds. House of ReAwakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriads of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, we are proud and pleased once again to present our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey.
Islam. This is important subject matter. This is important subject matter that we choose for tonight and also for this time. And in its nature, redundant, because truth doesn't come in versions. It is what it is. What you'll find is most people's concepts of both government and geopolitics is incorrect, right? What's being pressed on the people now, whether they want it to be or whether they don't want it to be, and we've said over the years, one of the things that men, and that's talking about the species, are going to be pressured in this time to do, to act upon, to display, is to prove their gods. Which means as man unfolds, his God unfolds. And everything that we have been professing in different areas around the planet concerning our special self-idea of importance and relationship is going to have to be proven. Meaning that it's sort of like when the sun's out, everybody can talk trash. We can have picnic, you know, whether you're eating peanut butter sandwiches or bologna, hey, do your thing. Talk trash and everything. Wind start blowing, funnels start forming in the air, and storm, rain, and hail starts coming down. You can roll your blanket up if you want to, like you got sense, put them sandwiches in the car or whatever, or you can sit there and try to prove your point and talk about it ain't gonna rain on me because I got a special relationship with the Lord. You know, most likely you have a soggy sandwich, you might get blown away, and you watch out for that tree that's falling and everything else. In the real world of economics and politics, that's what's happening all over the planet now. Knowing that most people aren't aware of, put it this way, the operations of the priesthood, who they don't suspect, that's really behind a lot of this mess, including artificial weather attacks, including psychic attacks that have been put on people, including sound wave attacks with subtle humming that the people got used to and never even noticed that it goes on to interfere with brain waves. We're not just talking about microwave technology, we're talking about actually sound wave technology too. Some of which is now being interfered with. We won't get into who's interfering with it and why. We're just saying it's being interfered with. So they can't continue to do a lot of things that they've been used to doing to humanity for quite some time. Now, humanity, for the most part, has been operating under feudal law operations for generations, and so conceptually, they don't know what constitutional law is. They've never lived under it. Are we clear? They've talked about it, but they've not lived under it. An example, and interject if you choose to. You know, we're going to interject. And any questions that come about it, you know, we'll talk about it, because it needs to be talked about. So I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. The average person that's going about their business in their everyday jobs, long O, short O, we need to not get into that. their relative, has been operating with an idea that their grandmother and their mother and themselves own a house and have a deed to it, as an example. At the same time, not knowing that the deed is a sharecropping agreement with the popes of Rome under the Roman Curia, run from Fleet Street, England, and then regulated with the mercenary army called the U.S. Army and controlled from Washington, D.C. All of which has nothing to do, in fact, constitutionally, with the people of the land or the organic land itself, but are in fact de facto governors over the land and the people. Are we clear? Distinguished from de jure. De jure means according to law and by right. You can go deeper, but this keeps it simple for the average person. De jure means according to law and by right. De facto means not according to law and not by right, yet it's operative. Are we clear? So people have been groomed and living under this, thinking that they were being protected under this, which we would call the Republic or Constitutional Law and Treaty. So the people's operative position is that the people who have been governing, who've been called government, have been operating de jure, when in fact they have been imposters for quite some time. They've been in fact imposters since 1861. And systematically, incrementally crushing the people's rights totally. By plan and by what is called, and you can write this down, corporate secession operations. And via the corporate secession operations, this is where planning information is transferred to the next generations or next holders of what you call political office and institutional office. Are we clear? To the masses, pardon me, these people are separate. This is where you hear the term all the time, separation of church and state. Understand that has always and only been for the masses, never for the ones who project it. Are we clear? For they know that this corporate state and the church are one, always have been. Never have been separate. It is the offspring of the church. All right? And of course, the church is not what people think it is, nor was. Now, as a point of interest for people who may want to get into that, and we won't get into that, let's talk about what church means. Church is from Germanic church, which means the great circle. That's what it means. So we notice the zodiac, but we also know that they don't teach it. So we need not go there. We're just giving definition of what the word church means. So we don't have to tell you that most people that go to these buildings have never been taken to church. They've been going to these buildings called church. Are we clear? That doesn't take anything from them, but it does expose the person standing at that pulpit who knew this and never told them, and is part of the system of robbing them for Rome under Roman tithe system, which is 10% tax for Rome, that they actually been working for Rome all the time. We need not get into that, but that's just simply the truth. So these things need to be known in order to begin to relieve the pressure on humanity, and to also get them in such a recognition of self that they're not pitted against each other in wars which has been actually perpetrated by these very people who've been selling them gods in secret, who look good and holy and mighty, but in secret have been meeting with these other people called politicians, all of whom are priests who've actually been planning all of these wars all around the planet and pitting people against each other in the name of racism. That is a total fiction. That's the truth. So, in order to stop or to bring some peace on this planet, whether people choose to act on it or not, every man, woman, and child has a right to do what they want to do. However, they also have a right to know the truth about how things work, to make those choices rationally. Right? And so they must know the difference between de jure and de facto. If, and since it is an issue also concerning government, right? If you want to look at synonyms to get a concept with this, if you're talking about government, here you would talk republic, right? Here you would talk democracy. These are opposites. So the people have been told that the real government is a democracy, when actually the democracy is the body of organized imposters. So what occurs when the people keep teaching their children our democracy? They have sanctioned actually the imposters, which is why they're broke, why they've been suffering. Yes, why their communities have been gentrified, and also why they've been sent to all these wars, going to and fro the earth, devouring nations, in the name of gods and countries. And never suspect that these people are actually demons. And that's for real. And we're not talking about, the vampire in the movie type thing. We're talking about people in shirts and ties and looking quite legitimate. And they've been getting away with it because the people don't know what they're looking at. They don't know what they're dealing with. And because they don't, makes them easy victims. As an example, this is what they'll do. Like, you can be presented as a nation state, or even someone who has, say you have a piece of land over in New Jersey somewhere, that an oligarch that you think is your congressman or congresswoman wants to sell to someone in, as an example, Ukraine, who they have partnership with, right? They will take tax that they taxed you with, go hire a contractor who will hire a contractor who has stock in their secret corporation, vice versa, to go poison your wells. And will put an ID card that came from you near the well. And then all of a sudden someone will find that ID card and they'll blow it up in the newspaper. Then they'll come and raid your house, maybe kill some of your family members and you. And you're charged with poisoning his well. Now his well's no good, now they're going to come and rescue him. And they'll declare your land uninhabitable and get you off the land. And if you don't cooperate, they'll do other things to you. Then they'll sell the land to their partner in Ukraine. And then the Ukrainians will kick back to the oligarch who you think is your congressman. And that's how the network's always been working. They do it to nation states and they do it to ordinary people on the land. Like say you got a piece of land and say you got some cattle on it and you've been farming this land and you got deeds to it and you got an idea that your family owned this land for 90 years type thing. And they discover some oil on your land that you think is your land. They will literally send an army out there and murder you and take it. Literally. If they can't get it in another way. you will be declared a terrorist, anti-government, sovereign citizen, because you're starting to talk Constitution, and anything that talks about Constitution, and they literally will murder you and your children, and literally take it, and then sell it to some corporation that has a contract with the United States mercenary operations and the oligarchs that you think is your congressmen and your senators. It's not a scenario that's true. That's just, that is a scenario I'm telling you, but do you know that those things happen every day and the average person doesn't even know what they're looking at, except people who really understand government and what is not government? So go ahead.
Islam, in that same vein of what you're speaking of, I've heard of persons who have had not only land taken away or scounded with, but they actually are in cahoots with these the banks, we know, and the credit organizations, and they will ruin a person's credit all of a sudden. They will make loans come due that they can't possibly pay, because it was supposed to be, say, over a period of time, and now all of a sudden it's due in full by a certain date, and they'll destroy people who begin to expose. I heard of a couple that exposed some Benghazi stuff, and by the time they got back to here, yes, they couldn't get any work. They lost their businesses because they just ran a gambit.
Now, can we interject right there, and don't lose your thought, because I want you to continue on that. Write this down. Confessed judgment. Confessed judgment. Now go back. Now go back to what you were talking about, and then I'm going to explain confessed judgment. Now, people at North Central America, that's called Defacto United States, which is really a corporation registered in Austria, having nothing to do with the land, but it appears to, because that's the people's training. Are we clear? So that must be clear in your mind. And for those who doubted, the reason I say that, because it's researchable. And because whenever you tell the truth, understand when you say anything that relates to truth, you will be immediately attacked. So let's get past that. So let's not be surprised. Let's know that that's already operative. Are we clear? If you say anything that's what is known as constitutional, you will be attacked. All right, so let's not act surprised. Know that that's protocol. Are we clear? However, most of the masses are not aware that because of the fact around the world, different people in what you think is government and people who are out of government by necessity, listen to what I'm saying to you, not because they're moral, though a few maybe, I'm not arguing that, to save themselves are coming together to unravel what has been operating on this planet for a couple hundred years. Not being aware of that is dangerous to you, not because it itself is dangerous to you, it's because not knowing it puts you in harm's way, because you're in harm's way anyway. But when you don't know a storm is coming, you can't prepare for it. Do you understand? When the people that you're dealing with that you think is your government and you're operating sincerely, it makes you an easier victim, because they're going to accelerate their intended injury to you, because they know that at this time, unlike times before, they're being uncovered. So they're doing desperate things when the persons who are not aware are even less aware. They're just thinking these problems are some outside source of stuff going on. and are attributing these economic and political problems to something that has nothing to do with its origin. Are we clear? It is not unlike not knowing that your gardener is the one who's been killing your animals. The gardener that you've been paying to do your lawn. And he's also the one that killed your baby that you thought disappeared in the forest 2 years ago. And you got a contract with him. And all the time they've been always right there, pointing over there. And all the time you've been paying them. And you trusted them. Not only that, they were in partners with the water guy that you've also been paying. And he's also the one that took your taxes and bought the pit bull that bit your cousin, that they talked you into buying a new Secret Service protection agency for multi-million-dollar contracts that you've been paying for the last 10 years and keeps going up another million every other year. You never dawned on you that all these people that you've had that you think are your public servants have actually been the ones that's doing 90% of every injury that's ever happened to you. And that's the truth. That's not an exaggeration. That's what's been happening here at North America. Now, point and fact. This is point and fact. They have created different sociology terms. White people, black people, middle class, lower class, elite, blah, 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 type thing, right? Yes. So what they've done is they've made people think that they're secure in these different class systems and pit them against other people in other class systems. These are words that they made up, sociological classifications. What has happened is, after they use them, then they discard them. Are we clear? When the Unum Sanctum operations was totally secure, they were able to always use what they refer to as the middle class to actually deal with what you call the sociological engineering of the lower class, which means most of the economic problems in the communities were created. They weren't natural, never were. That includes the poverty, the miseducation, the corruption, the dirt, the diseases, and everything. 90% of them are not natural, created in a laboratory, in truth. That includes the sicknesses and the diseases, including cancer, which is weaponized. That's a fact. All right? Problem. Some of the people in what they call the middle class have finally figured out that they're being sacrificed. So they are starting to tell, because most of them in what you call upper middle class are Masons, Shriners, Eastern Stars, DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, some in your lower memberships of the Thule Society, Knights Templars, Knights of Columbus, etc. Many who were once beneficiaries of this whole fraud are now being sacrificed. It's sort of like how do you say, the phoenix bird eating its own tail type thing, the snake eating its own tail type thing. That can't go on. So they're telling. Now, so what you have is sort of like the person that hired you to poison his well to get his well. Now has come the time where before things ran so well because they were robbing you to pay him. And then robbing this nation over here to fund all of this. And when one of those things in the chain is interrupted, it messes up the system. This is what is happening right now for what you call the United States government. And very often you will hear them saying, keep this in mind, write this down so you never forget this. When they're exposing a lot of this oligarchy stuff in the modern contemporary world, they will tell you The industrial military complex is the problem, right? And they'll say that Dwight D. Eisenhower, the German Dutchman, exposed it, right? In 1954, 55, right? They lied. He didn't say that. He said the congressional industrial military complex. And they took out that first word, congressional. Why did he say it? Because that's what it is and that's what it was. And that's what it is right to this day. If you forget the congressional military industrial complex, just like that, you never suspect that the congressmen and congresswomen are multimillionaires because they're really lobbyists for the United States Corporation Company of Wall Street. So you're looking at people with a box cutter in some cave in Afghanistan, Gaddafi, Castro, somebody in Iran and Iraq that had nothing to do with any of this stuff. And they'll sacrifice them, but they can't do it so much now they're going to sacrifice the people here. And most of the people aren't aware that that's what's in the cards. The reason they're going to sacrifice them because they know that you are most able to get back at them. That's why they want the guns of the middle class. That's why they want those guns. I'm just telling you, that's the reality of politics. What people do with it, that's on them. But you're being told the truth. On examination, don't accept what I'm saying, do the research. That's what's going on. However, for the few of the humans that have any integrity or honor left, so they can start doing whatever they need to do to start saving their families, they better keep this in mind because they need to know who they're talking to and who they're not talking to, and who they're paying taxes to and who they're not paying taxes to, and what they're funding and what they're not funding themselves against themselves, because the people they thought were their friends are really their enemy. And that's the truth. The other deal is that every time they do something to the people, they always blame somebody else that had nothing to do with it. It's called projection. Write that down, keep that in mind. It's called projection. That is an organized practice, a conscious practice. Are we clear? A taught practice. Are we clear? All politicians at North America are trained in projection. That's why all of them belong to secret societies. Meaning that most of what they tell the public, no, they don't believe it, and they never did. They're just trained, what you call, to give what is called a public narrative. And anything that they say positive, guaranteed, they never fulfill it. Never, and never intended to. So get over yourself. And don't get disappointed. Because you should have figured this out generations ago, but nevertheless, it's what it is. Meaning that this is the face they wear, the mask. This is who they are. Are we clear? That's what you're dealing with. And the body of law that goes with them. Constitutional law and feudal law. They're opposites. You can also call it this. And this is so within the context of our conversation that when certain words are said that you'll understand or comprehend where we're going with the conversation, because we don't have the time to do an etymology on every word. But you need to know the context in which we're speaking. Because as we expose this information, there will be others who will be paid to counter us and say that we're saying something that we're not saying. To the negative. Do you understand? Go ahead.
Fascism related toward feudalism and feudal, is that the same?
Fascism is also not what people have been told. Fascism is literally and simply, which is what's going on here, true, yes. This is where the corporations that are operating on the land are secretly running the government. Are we clear? But the persons who are claiming to be government are pretending that they're separate from the corporations. And sometimes not, but that's what a fascist is. Okay. So fascism is where the corporations that are supposed to be kept in check by government are actually running the government, and they're actually in partnership to the injury both by fact and both by intention of the people. And that the people are made servants to them as opposed to being served by them. And all laws are groomed to serve that end. It's not opinion, that's what fascism is. I'm trying to keep it simple. All right? And do the research. They'll tell you similar to what I just said, but not bluntly like I said, because that's what it is. And that's actually what's been taking place since 1861 when they got rid of Lincoln. That's the real reason they got rid of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was the last lawful de jure president for the United States. After Abraham Lincoln, every president operating at North America was and is a Democrat feudalist, even if they say they're part of the Republican Party.
That's right.
Republican Party does not support the Republican. Are we clear? And their politics is to deceive you while raping you generation to generation, as well as dumbing you down. The problem that we have now is that they have taken so much blood from the people that the people are getting ready to collapse. The people are used to programs and being programmed and are pretty sure, vainly, that the so-called politicians are going to come to their aid and save them. When the real deal, they're setting up for themselves and their own future while preparing to sacrifice the people, because they know if you wake up, you might come at them with pitchforks. Again, that's why I'm telling you why they're doing all these things, wanting your guns. It's not defense. Guns aren't violent. Violent people may use a gun. You know, like bolts. Don't do this. Ooh, that was a good one. Let's ban bolts. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they say that about guns, and people who don't think actually fall for it, not knowing that their intention is to disarm the people because they know that you're going to find out what they really did to you. They know that the masses of people in the poor communities have no defense whatsoever, so they just kill them at will. Like, say, for instance, you could be selling potato chips on the corner of the street, and they'll come and literally choke you to death right on the street and say that you were violent, and no one goes to jail. But they can't exactly do that in some other communities who happen to have their rods and their staffs, and they comfort someone. So they need to get them rods and them staffs from them, because truthfully, that's where it's going. Now, that's the truth. The masses, for the most part, smell it but don't see it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Well, those who really know the real history that's been going on at North America know that it's coming. Now, deal of it is, the priesthood, who are calling themselves politicians, also know it's coming. This is where you see all this wildness going on between the Democratic Party trying to get Trump out of office. That's what that really is about. I'm telling you what it's about. They can tell you anything they want to tell you. Telling you what it's about. It's really an undeclared, not public, it's really a civil war that they're trying to operate with the appearance of civility. Do you understand? But don't be surprised if, which they do, because they've always practiced what they call false flags and red flag type stuff. They've always done that. To distract as well as to justify doing things to the people. Meaning that they will come, they'll hire somebody with your tax money to go shoot your dog and then already have a so-called law in place to come take your guns to save your dog that was already killed by some lone gunman who didn't get a peanut butter sandwich at McDonald's and shot your dog. So they want to take your guns because the criminal's gun shot your dog. The real deal is because they know the way things are going on the planet now, that you're going to find out that all of these negative things that's been happening to you, they were the ones that did it and paid for it by contractors with your tax money against you. And you called him and her your congressman. Not knowing that secretly they were oligarchs since they murdered Lincoln. Now, like any other false platform or false position, in time, anything that's fraudulent begins to eat itself. This is really what's happening. And so people who are aware of this have a different outtake on life and what they do, what they choose to do, how they choose things that they say, where they put their energy and service in. And logically, it appears to the masses who don't know this that these people are out of step or out to lunch, which is kind of understandable given the fact that they have thick, bifocal, super dark shades on them. They can't see in the day, less more than night. You know, and so knowing that that's the state of affairs, the perpetrators of these frauds push these people against each other to divide them. They get you arguing with each other about the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and who you're going to vote for, when the votes never counted anyway. Okay. And everybody that was put in any office at North America was already assigned before they got in office. All of those voting games is to spend the people's finances and to make them think they're important. And every one of those persons that you think that you're elected is already in cahoots to attack you with some contractor that they hire to rape you some more. Whether it's pharmaceuticals that they'll call health care, which is really death care. Whether it's military operations, defense, because the ones who are attacking you are them. They just do it through contractors, so it doesn't look like it's them. Then the finance loops right back to them. Are we clear? And of course, keep you busy. They argue with each other, dog and pony shows, so you think that we're going to give you a better sandwich than the other guy did. And they do it every 2 and 4 years. And it's worked. The deal of it is that's not exactly working anymore. And they see that this is coming to an end for real for them, even though many of the masses are still asleep. There's enough who are awake that are not going to tolerate this anymore. Do you understand? Yeah. And they know it's only a matter of time when a reasonable number of the common people wake up and going to come after their necks.
Yeah.
Starting with the people who claim to be God men on every other corner, who they didn't know, but now we're going to find out have actually been agents of the state. And have actually been keeping them abreast with what's going on in the individual local communities, while the people think they're praying to Jesus, God, and Allah type stuff. Now that's the ugly truth. And provable. However, most people will disagree in their opinions with what I just said, and I understand that. Although the record and the evidence will prove that to be true. They just don't want to admit their own hypocrisy, to have been supporting this farce themselves all the time anyway. However, because these people are willing to sacrifice them, is why I'm doing this subject matter. Because people don't know that these people who they trusted are already processing to sacrifice them. Even to the degree of doing what they like to call serious false flags, no different than they did when they took them buildings down in New York when Germany came for their gold, and they were stealing the gold. And one of their trucks were actually in the tunnel when the building fell. And that's why they got rid of all of the debris real quick and then put yellow tape around it and did an examination of that scene. Why? Because they did. And everybody in the world knows it, but the people here. Do you understand? Now, and keep this in mind, this is very important. This is very important to recognize from a political perspective. And interject if you please too. Understand that Germany is the United States corporation #1 ally. France second, but Germany first, right? Now, when Germany, the representatives of Germany sent ambassadors to New York City to check their gold holdings in the vaults, because there's a tunnel that goes from those twin towers that was in New York to the Federal Reserve underground, and always did, that the masses don't know about. And that they were stealing gold from other nation states that they were holding in New York. They were doing it all the time, selling it and leasing it to keep their corporate shell going. Germany sent a couple of ambassadors to check on their gold, which were all numbered. Do you understand this? All numbered. They told them to go take a walk, to go take a hike. Now keep in mind, Germany's their #1 ally. Then a few days later, those buildings came down and they accused a man that they called bin Laden of doing it from a cave in Afghanistan with a box cover and a computer. And the people bought it. The people knew they were lying and they knew they were lying, but yet the people took that narrative and blew it up and it became the documented history. That's the kind of stuff they are willing to do to the middle class, to preserve their position. Now, when the middle class finds that out, not that they didn't really know it, they kind of really in their heart knew it. They were just in denial. But they didn't think that, that these people would start stealing their accounts. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Everybody's catching it, but they didn't think that they really do that to them. Right? Well, they were, and they are. So now many people in the upper middle class are speaking out, and they're looked at like they're out for lunch. The ones that they don't kill. Because they will kill them. Let's not get this out of your... Let's not get this naive unreality that people have been protecting. Okay. They have a lot of body counts that you don't see in the newspapers. Every last one of those president people that you think is your president got a whole list of bodies that they've laid out. that knew the real politics, that either were going to tell or were tapped to tell, or in some way threaten them to expose the system. Because they have no intentions of the people coming literally down Washington, D.C., or in your local governments and hanging these people literally from the nearest light pole. So they'll kill the people before you do it. That's what their intentions are. That's why it's subject matter. Are we clear? So if you start talking about the Republic, they will say that you're anti-government. They'll plot on killing you and then saying you're the killer because you told them that the system's corrupt. You're going to get her killed for talking constitutional stuff. You're dangerous. And then people start looking at you for telling the truth, as if you're the one that took those buildings down in New York. You're the ones that threw the tea over at Boston into the water. You're the ones that poisoned the water out there in Oklahoma and blew the building up, type stuff. And now you're the one that are messing with the derivatives in Deutsche Bank, which is getting ready to hit the public in a few. Because all of their mortgages and stuff that the Jesuits' army through the CIA have been set up Deutsche Bank for in the first place. So all of the mortgages of all of your major banks, the called loans type thing that you're just talking about, were bundled and put in Deutsche Bank to hide from the people's eyes and ears. So when they look at Deutsche Bank, they're thinking, oh, that's Germany. What's that got to do with the U.S.? Because in their mind, the U.S. is a country. Are we clear? That's only in their mind. It's a delusion. Are we clear? So the U.S. is really a mercenary army for the Pope. Always has been. And they've dumped all their derivatives of these people here who've been claiming to be Americans and paying all these taxes. And their deeds and mortgages are bundled in there in Deutsche Bank in Germany. So I suggest you pay attention to Deutsche Bank closely. And every time something even shakes a little bit, don't think Germany, think North America. That's just an insight. I won't go into that, I'll just tell you that much. But because it's rattling heavy, even though the masses don't hear it, I'm just dropping that at you. You can do what you want to do with it. But what you're not going to do is deny what I just now said, because it's in the works already. It's sort of like you can tell people years ahead on some things, and they forget that you've told them years ago. So I'm telling you Deutsche Bank because that will happen soon, where you can't deny it. Oh, go ahead.
Islam. I try to get some of my news from other places, alternatives than what we would generally be, in tune. We'll tune into certain stations, but I listen to a lot of talk radio. And I believe I was either listening, I listened to Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, mostly daily, over a period of time, and last week they talked about Deutsche Bank and what's going on with that and what's getting ready to, which is exactly what you're saying. You're not going to hear that in the mainstream media because they want us to think that everything is all hunky-dory, rosy, everything's going well. But there are some that are actually speaking out and talking about what, not only are they talking about what's happening with Deutsche Bank now, but they're bringing back up what happened in 2008, in the bailout.
Because they're all related.
Right. So that's coming back up. And they're saying this time, though, it's going to be worse.
Now, we were telling, when George Bush was in office, when I was teaching mostly on a regular basis at the cathedral room in Harlem, at the National Theater on 5th and 125th, we were telling the people then to watch Deutsche Bank. Now this is when, like Bush gave that finance to the banks, and we were telling people, that they're really one network, and people were saying, no, he's not. I said, yes, he will. Don't worry about it. He will. And they're going to nationalize Chrysler, and they're going to nationalize General Motors. So basically what they did was take the people's tax finance and actually fund the bankers with their bare loans that they piled in Deutsche Bank to cover it up. That's what that was all about. And they'll talk about saving the auto industry to save jobs. No, they get it. And so shortly after that, you see Detroit die. I went to as an example, I went to Detroit. I did do a lecture at Considine Hall. And that was the last time I flew, because I already knew about the Wigner's disease, etc. But I flew to Detroit, and instead of staying at the Westin where they had prepared a suite for me, which they usually do when I go out of state, I stayed actually at the people's house, some of who were having me come out there. One, because it was about a mile and a half from Considine Hall. And two, because they were besetting on me and conversations, etc. And they wanted me to come to look at the hall and say where I wanted the cameras, where we wanted the boards. They had bleachers and chairs, so it was actually, over 1,000 people there, actually, somewhere in that area. And so they wanted me to say where I wanted all the equipment and how I wanted things set up. So they were going to take me there Saturday morning after I flew in, and one of the estates, like it looked like an estate house, on the corner, when we turned the corner, the grass was so well groomed it looked like astroturf. That's how well groomed it was, right? And had black wrought iron rolling fence on the side, had the double gates in front, double doors, well stained, heavy, thick wood doors. There was, as I recall, a black Cadillac, spotless in the driveway. But it had space for other cars too.